Hello, everyone, and welcome. So today I'm joined by Warren Richardson. I'm pretty excited to have him here. Warren's a freelance photojournalist who's currently working in Europe and Eastern Europe. He focuses on long-term projects that specifically deal with humanitarian and environmental issues. Warren's a fabulous storyteller and a genuine catalyst for creating change, which is why I've asked him to join me here today. He's been in war zones, to tsunamis, refugee crises. He's worked with homelessness and drug addiction and mass death. Born and raised in Australia, Warren is my cousin. And so we have a very strong connection. And I think it's fascinating that we've both ended up doing the work that we do. Warren's also lived in Asia, the USA, Europe, and the Middle East. He's had the privilege of interviewing the Dalai Lama, as well as many well-known high-profile people and celebrities. Warren has won the prestigious award of World Press Photo of the Year in 2015. So I'm incredibly proud, Warren. And this is for his photo of refugees crossing the border from Serbia into Hungary. And, you know, he captured desperate refugees passing a baby through a border fence in the middle of the night. And like, it's just absolutely incredible, some of the experiences and things that he's been able to capture along the way. And this was while the whole area was under patrol. So Warren, you've covered so many topics over your career, and there are so many things we could discuss today, but I thought it would be worthwhile to discuss and focus on homelessness and addiction. You know, you have such an incredibly unique story and perspective in this space, and I just love the rippling effect that your work is having. I feel so incredibly fortunate and privileged to have you here with me. So thank you for taking the time to share some of your stories and insights with us. So Warren, I'll hand over to you now. And I just wonder if we could start our conversation with delving into, you know, what has driven you to do the work that you do?
There's so many different reasons, really. I think personally, it came across by accident. I was in Norway in the early 2000s, and I came across an addict. He really had a strong essence about him that really captivated me in a lot of ways. And some of the things he said to me were quite unique. You know, like he even said to me, you know, if you were to try heroin the first time, as a strong-minded person, you would know when to stop. But someone with a trauma, it's much harder to stop because you're fighting to try and dull or numb that trauma within inside you, well, inside themselves. So what made it more bizarre, his name was Life.
Wow.
Which kind of made me really think even more. So I left Norway and I really focused on the British side of homelessness. I started documenting that. I think what really did it for me was the moment I won the World Press and what I saw within the refugee crisis to what was happening internally in every country around the world. Homelessness is and growing, you know, and how the public see homelessness. So I went out in the streets. I decided to become homeless myself. I put myself into it as a role-playing photojournalist. It was a tough gig for the first 3 months. You know, for the first 3 months in the UK, I spent it in one town. It's called Southend-on-Sea, which is east of or south of London. So I knew the town quite well. I'd spent a few years there living there with friends. So a friend said to me that it's really bad here, come and have a look. So I went out in the streets and I became homeless there. And
I
for the
remember.
first 3 months, I know
Yeah,
I
I remember that time, Warren, because I remember talking to you just before you went out, and how you were trying to shift some of the government policies and really create awareness around that change. And I remember being very worried about
well, I
you.
mean,
Yeah.
before I got to that level, though, I had to put in the hard work. So 3 months it takes for a homeless person to become recognised by the government to say, hey, he's legitimately homeless.
Mhm.
So I go into an undercover because I didn't want anyone to know who I was as a photojournalist and what degree I was as a person.
Mm.
So my first night was a nightmare. I mean, obviously I've told you before, but being kicked, be woken up by some man kicking me and his friends laughing and they're all drunk, and I'm thinking, oh my God, this is horrible.
Yeah.
It kind of put the fear into me a little bit. Now I had that street fear, like, what's going to happen next to me? Some guy tried to pee on me. I had food thrown at me. I had people come up to me and hand me a rope and say, don't hang yourself in the street, do it outside the street, away from the public. I had man put two fingers to my head saying, shoot you in the head just to put you out of your misery.
Wow.
But everything has a yin and a yang, because then you had the people that come up to you and show love for no reason. I would sit there and write a diary the whole time for the 3 months and have people put money into my diary. So what I did is I ran ledgers, what food was given to me, what drinks were given to me, how much money I made from it, what was said to me, and the whole book just became a ledger of comments of others. So what I really got to see was how the public perceived me as a homeless person. And it's half, and I did feel that point of lowness in myself. I felt that low feeling. Who am I? Is this who I am? Is this a part of who I am? Is this going to get any better? How do I get myself out of this? And that became the entity. I will never want to be in this position. So how am I going to get out of it? So after 3 months, I walked into a center in Southend called HARP, and I signed in as a homeless person. This gave me the rights. There was 2 tick boxes I could tick. One box basically said, I can sign my life over to them, which means they know if I'm a criminal, they can do records on me, they can know my bank accounts, they know everything about me. And the other box was no. As yes, I get all the facilities given me. No, I only get a minute amount of those facilities. It means I can have a shower, a free breakfast, and when it gets to 3 degree below zero, I'm allowed to sleep in a hotel via the financial gain of them.
Okay.
For me, it was hard. It was really, really hard. But what the woman said to me after I'd done the 3 months, do you know you're entitled to have a bank account? Well, little did I achieve a bank account as a homeless person. I didn't know it was going to take me another 18 months. That's what frustrated me. That's 18 months of my life I lost because I needed to get a bank account to become a civilian within that area again. Without a bank account in the UK, you're a nobody. You have nothing. And that's the hardest part. That was, to me, was the hardest part of the first 3 months was tough. But that last 18 months was exhausting. And the moment I sat there with the bank manager, when she said, congratulations, you've got a bank account, I nearly cried in front of her. Because it was just, I was mentally exhausted. I was drained. I knew everything about the streets. I became street smart. I ended up being the counselor on the streets because the addicts didn't want to talk to the counselors in the centers because they felt that they were being belittled or they were achieving their objective. There was criteria that the counselors would go to in centers but couldn't go any further. I didn't care about any of that because I just allowed myself to be who I am around them, to allow them to feel comfortable with me, to be able to tell me what they wanted, which helped them or inspire them to move forward. There was one character on the streets of Southend said, no photos of me. I don't want you to take any photos of me. That's okay, but I still want to be your. 4 years later, he said to me, you never took any pictures of me. Why? I said, because you told me I wasn't allowed to. Well, now you can, because I trust you. And that's what it's all about, trust level. When you're on the streets, you learn not to trust. You can't trust anybody. You can never sleep in the same spot, because if someone sees you, you don't know if they're going to come.
Yeah, very much survival.
You have to move around. You can't stay anywhere. If people give you money, you say thank you. You don't ever show them any kind of aggression. You become transparent in a way. People look at you, but they look through you, not at you. So that really, it kind of really put something in me. But what really, that part of it was when I was on the refugee crisis, and that I saw the refugees go through the hardest parts of their life. But when I went into Germany and lived in refugee camps there, it really enlightened me that the depression in the camps was high, but at the same time, governments were throwing money at them to house them, feed them, give them warmth, give them education, give them well-being. At this, when I'd look out the window of the refugee camp, I'd see two homeless guys sitting there who were indigenous to the country, but were given nothing. And this bothered me. I'm not racially fueled at all, but that bothered me because I'm thinking, hang on, that's kind of hypocritical in a way. You can help a stranger when they come into your house, but you can't help the people who actually live in your house. How does that work? So, and that's one of the reasons I zoned in on the homeless, because I feel more for the homeless people than I do, not being rude, for the refugees. My heart goes out to these homeless people. A lot of them, you know, just because someone's homeless doesn't mean that they're a criminal. Just because someone's a drug addict doesn't mean they're violent and they're a criminal. Just because someone's an alcoholic doesn't necessarily mean that they're a horrible person. You know, everyone has a trauma. And sometimes when someone has a trauma, they bottle it up inside and they use something else that dulls that trauma or suppresses that trauma even further. It's like, you know, when you're angry about something, you're tired and you're hungry, you naturally get angry, you naturally get frustrated, you actually become less tolerant. We'll try and think of someone as a trauma at that level, but heightened by 10 times over. They're going to trap it inside themselves, not going to be able to let it go. And they're going to use something to completely dull that moment, suppress it.
Yeah. So, you know, I mean, it's just such a profound experience. And I wonder, like, what are the biggest learnings that you got out of that experience? You know, I know where to start, but what
I
is,
could write, um,
and
I
write a book.
take nothing for granted. Never take anything for granted. And you know, when I see someone at a position like today, for instance, I'm in Canterbury today, and I walked into a shop and I heard this little voice on the side of the footpath, and he yells out to me because he remembered me. He remembered my face. It was amazing. And he said to me, "Hey man, I was talking to you about a month ago. I really liked my conversation with you. Can you come and talk to me now?" And I said, yeah, come and talk to him. And I ended up spending about 3 hours with this guy and a Polish guy who were homeless. And he started scratching the top of his head, kind of like, "Oi, what's happening to the top of your head there?" And he's got a wound on his head. And he said, "No, that's nothing." And he shows me his legs. And by what I've learned from the streets and what I've learned through addiction and drugs and what they can do to the physical form, the moment he showed me his legs, both legs had crocodile on them. And I mean, gaping wounds that are weeping on his legs. And I said, my advice to you, my friend, hospital right now. You can't play with this, because if you play with this any longer, if you allow that addiction to take over this, you're going to lose your legs within the next couple of months. Which one is it? Do you want to be mobile and well, or do you want to be in a wheelchair for the rest of your life? Make that choice right now. So when I learn something, I learn how to direct it very, very quickly, because to me that is important. You know, I don't hate anybody, and this guy, I like the way he can talk about things, and if he lets it out, he becomes comfortable with me. And I say straight away, I'm going to be brutal, and he accepts the brutality of what I'm saying. And I think in that case, you kind of got to put a scare tactic across, because if you don't, that addiction will cloud everything that's going on inside his physical form just to have the next hit.
Yeah.
You know, he told me he's been doing brown in the UK. Brown is classed as heroin, white is classed as crack cocaine. He said he's been doing both, mixing it into a needle, and he shoots it into his groin, which means it runs down the leg inside the vein system, gets caught in one of the vein systems and causes an ulceration, which pierces through the skin. Before you know it, the ulceration starts to grow. Before you know it, his wound's like this big. and it's huge, and it's in deep. It's like a dent in his leg, and it's horrible. I can actually see his carved tendons, his bone.
Wow.
So, you know, and this is the damaging part about drugs. When you so over excess on drugs and you've suppressed that trauma so much, that addiction will take over, and before you know it, all hell's going to break loose in your physical form.
Yeah, yeah. And so, what is it you'd like to share to help people understand, the plight a bit more?
What I would like, I
Mm,
mean, what I'm doing right now is I'm working on a permaculture farm.
mm,
And the reason I'm working on a permaculture farm is that I eventually want to have a farm of my own where I can take rehabilitating on board my farm and teach them skills, which one of the things I've realized within drug addiction is they lose one major entity, the act of responsibility.
mhm.
And I want to bring back that amount of responsibility by them growing vegetation, edible vegetation, so they can actually live off the land, how to do certain things around a property that allows them to use their mind to stop them thinking of intaking into the drug. So part of what I'm doing is the next step of the next stage of what I want to do.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
And
there's so many areas I would like to go down, but what my major part is I don't want to see drugs swapped for drugs. No methadone, no Supertex, stuff that they use is like a band-aid to kind of pull them off other drugs. I want my farm to be completely drug-free. So when they come on, all they're able to do is there is a certain amount of rules I will have, no drugs, no alcohol, and I want them to be able to express themselves, express the trauma, help get that trauma out of them, help them find something in themselves that can help them move forward in life.
yeah, exactly. I think the work that I do as a self-directed healer, healing practitioner, when we work with clients that have addictions, it's very much about understanding what is causing the pain so that you can feel it in a natural way without having to go to the drugs to do that. And, and that whole cycle of, you know, taking the pain builds up and then they take something to relieve the pain, which is the addiction. Then there's the judgment and just that feeling of not being good enough, which then exacerbates those emotions. The emotions build up and it's just this cycle. And so it's how can you, because I love what you're saying, it's how can you feel those emotions and express and connect with yourself in a way, like to learn to take responsibility, but learn healthy ways to connect with yourself and feel so that you're not as reliant on ways to numb the pain.
Well, I mean, I do believe that the system, I mean, the system within drug rehabilitation
Mm,
needs to have a massive reshuffle of their whole entire overlook of it. You know,
mm, mm,
stop using drugs to trade off drugs. You know, that's one thing.
mm,
Don't spend 80% of your time trying to clean the physical form. Spend 80% of that time on the mental form. You
mm,
know, because I think this is highly important. You know, instead of looking at the person as a number because you know they're going to relapse, because once an addict goes into, like, you take Norway has a 3-year rehabilitation system. So an addict will go in for 3 years, they come out $1 million physically and mentally because they give them a certain amount of mental tools, but that sustainability is not there because once they've left the rehabilitation system, they're put into a housing system, which is for rehabilitating addicts. But the problem is there's another 50 addicts in there. And what do you think's going to happen?
mm.
Straight away, they're all going to be back on drugs, and means they're going to recircle back into that whole motion again, which is perfect for the system because you see, the thing is, if you got rehabilitating addicts and they don't come back anymore because they've been rehabilitated, industries fall, companies can't get their money anymore. So it's about making money in a way. It's a business for money. I don't agree with this. Totally don't agree with it because human beings should never be a number. They should be looked at individually.
Mm, mm,
They be looked at, I'm going to fix you and I'm going to put every piece of my energy in to fix you. There was a case in Southend. I'm not going to mention the guy's name because he didn't want photographs taken of himself, but he's a primary case. He came out of rehabilitation after 2.5 years, and he he was a positive thinker when he came out. He had goal sets, he knew what he wanted to do when he came out. But because the center completely screwed up and lost his equipment because he started a barber course, it sent him straight back into that area again, and he started using drugs again. Problem again is that he was ringing them up saying, I need someone to talk to. I need someone to talk to now. I'm feeling that pull on the drug. I want to go and use it, but I need someone to talk to me so I can get away with it. Oh no, next week you might as well just hand the man a 44 Magnum and put one bullet in the chamber and say, spin the barrel and say, good luck for a whole week. It's not going to work. If someone says they need help immediately, you give them help straight away. And this is what I found frustrating, because he knew that I was around, and he knew that I wasn't going to let him out of my sight. And he did get out of my sight. He used crack cocaine. And I sat on his bed inside a drug rehabilitation center where other addicts were living, and I knew he was high. His mother rang. And the moment his mother rang, he broke down and cried, because he knew that he was going to disappoint his mother if he was to speak to her because of that. So instead, he hands me his phone, and I had to talk to her myself. Where's my son? Oh, no, he's just gone to the shop. He's going to get some stuff. Who am I? I told her my name. She goes, oh, I know who you are. I'm really appreciative that you're spending a lot of time with my son, blah, blah, blah. But I felt bad because he was there the whole time looking at me, and I knew the position he was in. And all I did is, when she hung up, I said, don't ever, ever expect me to do that again. You have to pull your thumb out of your ass. You have to make choices. And he said, well, this is the problem in the system. I need someone to be there that I can go and talk to, like a counselor. And this was the hardest part. This is the reason I've really dug into this project deeply, because not only now am I seeing the addicts, I'm seeing the holes in the system. And there's too many of them. There's way too many holes, gray areas in the system. It comes down to money, how much people have to spend, how much governments want to give to homelessness and drug addiction. Problem is, homelessness and drug addiction is not a blue chip stock. It's not going to make money. It's just a bin to put money in.
Yeah. And I wonder how much the people that are making decisions really understand. Like you, as I said, you have a unique perspective because you've been there and lived the experience. And, do you find that they listen?
The addicts or the...
Like the people making the decisions?
No. I was at a meeting in Southend, and I'm not going to mention names because I don't find it fair, but I sat in one of them and in a meeting, and there was a few government officials there. And the only person who really knew me at the time was the chairman of the board. And I think he kind of looked at me as some sort of secret weapon. He was kind of desperate for me to be there. And they were very influential people there. There was a topic that came up on alcoholism, and I found it very interesting. I listened to everyone. I think some of the ideas were kind of good, but again, it's people playing around with that idea of who they are within their career. And this is what I found within this organization or this committee. Everyone's got a tag to their name. Me, I'm a social worker, I'm a counselor, I'm a psychologist, or I'm this and I'm that. So anyway, I listened, and the chief of police was there as well, and a mayor. And I put my hand up and said, I've got an idea. I said, it's easy. I've seen it done in the city before, and it worked absolutely brilliantly. And I think it's a necessity. It could work in this city quite well. And I think if you do it, you'll probably be one of the leading cities in the whole entire country. And they may follow suit, because you have a massive alcohol problem here. It's a very violent alcohol problem. And I said, it's easy. Stop selling alcohol after 9 o'clock at night. Bang, it's finished. Because the smart people who drink will come down to the bottle shop at 8:30, buy all their alcohol and take it home and drink. They won't sit there and drink in the streets. Secondly, you have all the nightclubs, the restaurants, and what do you call them, discos or whatever call them. They can sell their alcohol within their premises because that's what they're licensed for. But the bottle shops that are selling 24/7 stop at 9 o'clock. That's it. I said, because the stupid alcoholics, they'll come down and go, bugger, I can't buy alcohol because it's the law. Wow, when I said that, it was like tumbleweeds and silence. You couldn't hear anything. It's like the homeless dude speaking logic. How can that happen? Mayor looked at me very, I know, it was very belittling in by way he looked at me, and he said to me, taxes and revenue, taxes and revenue. It's like, that's all you can think about, but you're not thinking about what the alcohol does to people. It makes them worse. They become fueled up and tanked up, and before you know it, a couple going down the street and they're being beaten up by some alcoholic because you're too ignorant not to sell your stop selling your after nine. I said, well, you got a problem.
Mm.
Well, the chief of police stood up, and he turned around and said, "That's out of 10 years I've been coming to this meeting, that's the smartest thing I've ever heard said. Make that happen." And the mayor looked at the police officer like, "Whoa, hang on, you're meant to be on my side." No, he said, "That guy's got a point." And he turned around, the officer turned around and said to me, "Where have you seen this happen before?" I said, "Norway did it. Norway put a law down. No more alcohol sales after 9." And I said, the whole entire city, the whole entire country went into lockdown like that. And that's how it works now. And I said, it's not about controlling and having control over people. It's controlling a problem.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. Love that. And
And
I'm
that's
sure.
that, that's one entity of it. And
Mm.
then I turned around and I attacked the organizations by asking, why are they charging homeless people money to stay in their organization when they're getting funding from and grants from other areas that are giving them mass revenue, where they're buying up property. So they're buying up a street. Basically, they devalue the street by having homeless people and alcoholics and drug addicts walk up and down the street every single day, devaluing the property. So when the property devaluates so much, they snap the property up at a cheap price. So what they're doing is building up a portfolio on governmental money.
Right.
It's a business. It's a thriving business. This is not helping. That you need the numbers to make the money, and they don't want to fix the people. That's how I'm seeing it. Whereas they might argue the point with me, but I don't see it as being fixed, because exactly the same homeless people are on the streets and exactly the same drug addicts are on the streets. It's not like they're disappearing and coming back. They're there, and that's as simple as that.
Yeah, they really are. And, you know, it's just such a, I mean, I don't know enough about it. So that's why I'm kind of trying to draw out as much as you know and as much as you can share, because I know here in Australia that over 65-year-old women is our highest growing homeless group at the moment. And that's such a,
That's devastating.
it's absolutely devastating. So, women who are
Embarrassing.
becoming single, or have come out of a marriage, or maybe their partner's died. I don't know the circumstances, but they're not earning the income, and that is our largest growing homeless group at the moment. And it's devastating, absolutely devastating.
Well, I mean, there's all different stories for homelessness, and hypothetically, you might have a 60-year-old woman in the streets of Australia. So maybe she's had sciatic pain for most of her life, or she's had arthritis, and all of a sudden the doctor has prescribed her an opioid. She automatically becomes an addict. All of a sudden, her husband dies. Everything she's known is no longer there. So she finds she struggles with having to deal with the male side of things as what she did on the female side of things. So, you know, the oldest person I saw on the streets of Southend was 75 years old. His wife died. And the way he told me it, this is what he said. He said, she kept the house, organized bills, he organized this. I went out and earned the money.
Mm.
She passed away. Everything he knew was gone. He basically took his house keys, put them in his own letterbox after locking the house, and now spent the last 10 years on the streets. He misses her so badly that the last time I was with him, I helped him out of an overdose. I had to Noxicam him up the nose and bring him out of an overdose. Saw him today. He'd gone to the hospital, but the next day I saw him. He was back on the streets again. This is how bad the system in the NHS is at that moment. I don't know about now, the COVID-19, but he turned around in front of a camera and said to me in a video, "Warren, next time I overdose, please don't bring me back. Let me die. Just let me die. I don't want to be here on this planet no more. I want to be with my wife, wherever she may be. I want to be with her. I don't want to be here anymore. I have nothing to live for. That's a level. That's a whole new level of homelessness. And that's just one story. I have many stories like this. People get to that level on the street, there's no coming back. Some of them, that's it. Once the streets have got you, that's it. How can we prevent it? We can prevent it many, many ways. We educate our next generation to say, this is how bad things can get. But the next generation could be the one that helps and stands up for the homeless people on the streets now. Instead of putting money before human life, we should be putting human life first and financially finding a way to help these people come back. Meaning that we need to put more manpower into generating a system where we can put people into housing, but 3 times a week we go around and see them and say, okay, this is how we pay bills. I'm going to give you a hand doing that. This is how you do shopping for yourself. And what do you need to talk about? What's inside you? Are you having withdrawal symptoms on your addiction? And you've got to talk to them. And that's what they need the most, because most homeless people are so sheltered to the world, they have no idea how to do anything.
Yeah, and I think that understanding is just so pivotal. And for those of you, I didn't actually introduce myself at the beginning of the interview. For those of you that don't know me, I am Christy Roberts. So I'm a mindset and results coach, and also self-directed healing practitioner. And those who know me know that my son Aaron passed away earlier this year in March. And what I've learned through that experience is that, yes, I'm grieving, but I'm getting a lot of clients coming to me who are grieving as well. And I imagine there'd be so many people on the streets who have that trauma and grief. And it's not understood. Like, I think in our culture and our society, we don't understand trauma. We don't understand grief. I think in so many places, especially in Western world, and we just don't know how to support people who are grieving. And it's about understanding how we're feeling, because everyone who's grieving grieves differently. And so we really need to come from that place of understanding. When I have clients come to me, it's like, what are you feeling? Because I'm grieving, but that doesn't mean my grief is the same as theirs. And I imagine everyone out there on the street, having someone there holding that space and who actually cares enough to ask, what's happening in your world. So I love what you're saying, because it's so important. And I think that the systems can become very depersonalized in a way, when you talk about numbers and that sort of thing. And so it's really connecting with what's really going on for that person, because I think in some ways people put on a mask for the world, but then it's what's really happening underneath. And the more we can understand how to connect with people, and it does, you talked about that man that took 4 years to gain his trust. When you're in such survival instincts and such survival mode and fear, you don't trust. Of course you don't trust. So how do you build that? Like, it takes long-term
That trust level,
connection and relationships. And there's just so many layers.
That trust level came in on a certain degree of pain that he was going through. So I slept in a door shop with him for a few times, and another guy called Graham. Graham's an opioid addict as well, so he needs massive amounts of drugs to survive. His hands are all ballooned up, but I noticed something with Dave, and here's the character Dave. Dave was very, how would you say, he was grumbling in the morning. He has to drink in the morning, and he drinks till he sleeps, basically, and uses opioids as well. And I looked at Dave and said, "You okay, mate?" And he just said, "I feel horrible. I'm in so much pain." And the way he held his arm was like it was dead. So I had to take his top off and realize that through the night, his arm, and there was a ulcer that had built up in his arm itself. What he'd done is he'd used a needle, and the needle obviously had punctured the wrong vein, which caused a abscess under the skin. And literally as he slept, the abscess exploded. So blood and water was everywhere inside his top. And as we took the top off, the whole wound just started spraying everywhere. So I kind of did say to him, "This is a photographic moment," and that's when he turned and said, "Shoot it, show everybody." And that's the reason I started getting images from him. When it comes to trauma is in many different ways. People handle trauma much differently than
Yeah.
most.
Yeah.
I did a bit of a survey when I was in the UK on males. We always look at the male as the strongest, stereotyping, but what I discovered is that 80% of the males on the streets of the world and the UK suffer from a very similar trauma, which is, it really surprised me, and it really opened my eyes in many different ways, is that anywhere between the ages of 9 and 11, males have been raped. So when she is raped, she will express that. And I've seen homeless women who are on the streets who have been raped, and they don't stop talking about it. They let it out of themselves, and then it angers them, and you can see how much they frustrate, and they're very vocal about it. But a man will suppress it, victimize it. He will block it in himself, and he won't say a word. He gets to his 50s, and all of a sudden that crack in the facade starts to form. And he may start beating up on his wife. Perhaps he starts to rape. Maybe he's fiddling with children. It's hard to say, but that's when the cracks in the facade start to happen. All of a sudden the wife says, "Hang on, I don't want you in the house anymore. That's it, it's finished." He becomes homeless. He goes from drinking, what he was doing before, to now using more, social drugs, marijuana, ecstasy pills, and whatever he can get his hands on. And when he's on the streets, he graduates to a whole new level. He goes into the opioid level. Before you know it, that downward scale is there. It doesn't stop. I did have one moment in Southend where it came to light in a very different way. I was sitting there under a bridge. I sat under a bridge for 3 months. This is where I wrote in my diary. And this is where most of my stories came from, that one moment. I used to sit beside a woman who would lose a tooth every single day because of speed using. I would look after her dog while she went off and get her drugs, come back, she'd smoke them while no one was looking. Other side of me was usually another guy who was a speed addict. Across the ways from me on the other side of the bridge were heroin addicts. And they kind of took me in as one of their own, which was quite nice. But one day they were all off running around looking for drugs, because that was the meeting point. Get drugs, off they'd go. So it'd be just me, and I ended up looking after everyone's belongings, which I didn't mind, because they accepted me. So it comes with the responsibility. Anyway, this guy comes up to me, and he's probably standing about between 7 and 6 meters away from me, and he starts slurring his words, telling me to F off, and getting crazy with me. And I knew who he was. He's the town bully. He's the guy you don't screw around with. He's the guy with the trigger mind. His fists become the talking power. Vocabulary doesn't come into that. He's just violent.
Yeah.
So I asked him to sit down beside me, and he kind of went, okay. He sat beside me. But the crowd started building because everyone knew who he was. And I had people trying to whisper into my ear, "Are you okay? Do we get to police?" People putting food in front of me, always asking if I'm okay. I said, "I'm okay, thank you very much."
Sounds pretty volatile.
Yeah, so because that's how bad he can be. But what I did is I used a reverse psychology moment. So what I did is I broke all the food in half, and everything I was given was half him, half me. "Come on, Chris, you cannot survive off alcohol alone. Start eating." And he started eating. He didn't touch the alcohol. The bottle sat beside us, a really big 2-liter bottle of cheap whiskey, and he started putting food into himself. So I started asking him questions. He said to me that he had 3 different partners and 3 different children. I said, "You've been a busy man." Made comical from it, which kind of made him laugh a little bit. I knew that a man with a trigger mind like this can be quite volatile, so I have to be very careful how I put things. And then I kind of thought, no, I'm going to take a plunge here and I'm going to go straight into it. And I said to him, do you mind if I say something to you? And he said, yeah, go ahead. And I put my finger on his fists and I asked him, why are you the warrior here, touching his fists, and not the warrior here?
Mm.
And he started crying. And I said, the next question I asked was, do you miss your children? Are you a good role model for your children? His crying intensified. Everything that was going from his nose to his mouth to his eyes amalgamated into one, to a massive drop of fluid. I knew I was tapping into something that hadn't been tapped in before. And then I hit him with the biggest part. I said, I don't believe for 1 minute what I've just said and what you've just told me is the epicenter of who you are and the reason you do what you do. What is that epicenter? And I said, if you don't understand what I'm saying, you question it. You don't have to get angry over it, just question it. And he said, I understand perfectly what you said. The way he said it, it's like when you lost your son, you would have felt exactly the same way. Uncontrollable emotion.
Oh,
And that's the emotion.
overwhelming. Mm.
That's it. That's the emotion he went into,
Yeah.
to the point where he whispered like a child. It was like it happened to him right there. He looked over at me and he said, I was raped when I was 9 years old. And the way he said it, it trembled in his body and even in his voice. And I turned around, I put my arm around him and I turned around and said to him, you got to remember one thing, that wasn't your fault. That you were powerless to that. That was not your fault whatsoever.
No.
And that's why I ask, are you the warrior here or are you the warrior here? Because this is where you need to become the warrior. Don't speak with these anymore. Speak with this. Well, the crowd now has built up to about 70 to 80 people and they're all watching. The cameras in the street have turned on us. So I knew we'd obviously become quite an act in front of people. Well, he got up. He's a big, tall character and he's quite big, and he left his bottle of alcohol behind and he took off. Last I saw of him. I was a bit concerned for him. 3 days had passed. I asked a few people, yeah, you seen this guy? You know where he is? No, no one knew. I ended up having these 3 policemen come up to me, 2 detectives and a officer in uniform. And funny enough, they sat on the street with me, right beside me. And they asked me, what did you say to this guy? What did you say to Chris? And I said, well, one thing I've learned in life is that what is said to me belongs between me and that person. If that person chooses to tell you, then I'll leave that up to them to tell you. Because I ask you about a murder case here in Southend, you're not going to tell me anything, are you? So I'm not going to be in that same position to tell you. So you have to find that out yourself. And they said, no, we've come to pick you up because he's actually asked for you. He went into rehabilitation the same day and now he's in rehab. So I kind of thought to myself, hey, things are possible. If you tap into people very quickly, it can be quite a unique experience, to get that part of you that is destructive out of you as fast as possible, but find a way to work on it so it heals much quicker. The more you hang on to it, the worse things get. It becomes destructive, and not just destructive to the self, but destructive to others around you.
Yeah, that's such a powerful example of how you can shift, and by being understood. I thank you for sharing that story. Well, thank you for sharing all your stories. But I think, it's just, there is a way to penetrate. It's just having the patience and the knowledge and the understanding and the time and that curiosity, isn't it, really, of how to get there. And I think part of my work moving forward is, I can use my experience and use my love of my son to really get people to look at themselves, like deep within, and go, you know, if you died tomorrow, or if someone you love died tomorrow, would you have regrets? Like, have you done everything that you need to do in this life? And what can you do better? And how can you, because we all innately know we all innately know that we're capable of so much more than we're doing. Do you agree with that? I think we all, within us.
Well, I know for recently that due to lockdown in Eastern Europe and Europe, I tried very different. I decided not to use a plane. I decided not to use a ship. I decided not to, well, I did use one ship. I decided not to use buses, planes, or anything. So I bought myself quite a decked out bicycle, and I rode around Hungary for 5,000 kilometers. And then when the border opened, I continued on through Slovakia, Austria, Germany, Holland, Belgium, France, and into UK. And
I
made it the
followed you
whole.
on Facebook and you were taking all the photos of those cars.
The old socialistic cars. Yeah, I love them. But I did it because I can do it, and I'm not going to just sit around. I was probably the most social distance person that could ever walk the earth. I slept in a tent and a sleeping bag the whole entire 4.5 months, and I loved every single moment of it. I felt free within myself. I felt that, because what I did notice within lockdown, a lot of people were becoming suppressed and depressed. I wasn't going to fall into that bracket because, all my work dried up as well. I'm not immune to what's happened with the coronavirus, but I looked for an avenue to tell a different story, something within myself, a personal achievement, and I think personal achievements are something that we miss out on. I think we got to strive for personal achievements, and yeah, and say, what, I'm going to trust my instinct and I'm going to go and do it, because you just never know where they lead you. I've always had this philosophy: don't grab life with one hand, grab life with two hands. If you grab life with one hand, you only get half of life. You grab with two, you get all of it.
And I think it's really important. And I think the piece that so many people are missing is actually having some clarity around where it is you want to go, because I think so many people are stuck and just don't know what it is that's important to, like, we lose track along the way. And yeah, I think that's part of my journey. That's part of my work, is to help those people get that clarity, help them get direction, help them tap into and release a lot of the pain that's inside, that we trap along the way. I love watching your journey and some of the things that you're doing. It's absolutely fascinating, and hats off to you for doing what you do. If you were to
Well,
share.
my recent one is really, really beautiful, actually. I have been documenting a really big pig. And because you're in the permaculture side of things, because I'm in the permaculture side of things right now, it's giving me that, being on a farm is a sense of freedom, and I love it. So, the pig has become kind of really important to me. And on Saturday, she gave birth to 14 piglets. And the first two was the whole one. So literally 20 minutes after the baby being born, I had one in my hand, and it literally just sat from front toe to back toe in the palm of my hand. It was beautiful.
So
And
grounding, so grounding, and yeah,
oh, totally. And then
connecting, and yeah.
I'm in charge of 400 chickens. They've only just arrived, so I'm learning something very new. But I know I have to learn this, because to hand that knowledge on, I think, is highly important. I think this is the way life is going to lead. I think we need to learn how to go back to our basics,
Yeah,
how to really understand how vegetation works and how life works.
yeah.
And I'm enjoying it. I'm at the age when I really am really loving it. You're never too old to learn new tricks. As simple as that.
I know before we started recording this, you were talking about your vision. Is that something you'd like to share a little bit about that?
My vision, in the sense of having a
At the
farm.
permaculture, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so like I was telling you, I really want a farm where I can have addicts come on the farm, and instead of about, it's giving them skills to be able to work with, nurturing a garden with vegetation, and showing them how to work it, and then them able to eat what comes out of the ground. And I think this is a really important part of, survival. It helps them find a portion of who they are, give them skills that can really push them into different areas. even when it comes to just fixing a fence or making a polytunnel for greenery to go inside it, planting inside it. I think this is all a part of a rehabilitation. I mean, what it does for me personally, and I don't have addictions, but what it does for me personally gives me a sense of achievement. I'm achieving something within myself because these are natural skills that come from the earth, and I am earth and earth is me. Why would I not want to know this? This is highly important. And so for me to have a farm, to have rehabilitating addicts, not just rehabilitating addicts, but I think anyone that really suffers from a certain amount of depression, I want to help them. I would like to help them get over the hurdle of depression.
Mm,
Give
mm.
them give them an achievement within themselves. Find something in them. Look for that golden part of who they are, and really get them to focus on that.
Yeah, and give them some connection back with life.
At the same time, I'm
Know that,
here in
yeah.
Canterbury on another project where I'm doing a book. It's my first ever solo book, and I really would like to achieve it. It's about addiction. A lot of work's going into it. I'm using an artist who's a comic artist. And what I realize within my own work, even though it has a sense of power and behind the subject itself, I'm going to use the artist to draw and fill in areas of the story that I'm creating as a flowing visual story to show what happened to that person for the reason they became an addict. I want it to relate to all types. And within my book, I want it to be a sense of education behind it so that people can relate to it and say, I can see myself in that area, and this maybe give a moral fixing as opposed to telling people what to do, because I think telling people what to do is not always a good thing. I
Mm.
think people have got to find their own avenue, but if you can give them certain tools to say, that does work and that doesn't work and this
Yeah.
does work.
Yeah, yeah. And that's how coaching is such a unique journey, because because everyone's unique. So what works for everyone is unique. Yes, we've got tools and strategies and models and tips, but it's like you've got to pick out those bits that are going to work for you, that are meaningful for you, that are going to motivate you and drive you and connect you back to yourself. And so it's such a, it's becoming, it's one of the fastest growing industries in the world today, because it's really connecting. But rather than having a backward look, it sort of looks into the future and helps pivot people to help give them purpose and meaning, and to sort of some tools to create the life that's means something to them, and connecting them with themselves, and just knowing that they matter. What we do counts, and the work you're doing is absolutely incredible, Warren. And I can't wait to come visit your farm when you get it up and running, and support you
I'd
in
like,
the way that I
I would,
can.
I would like to have my farm in Hungary. I've already checked a few spots. Of riding around Hungary was to find areas that I liked, and I found quite a few of them right up near the mountains on the Ukraine border,
Mm,
and quite wilderness up there, and there were quite a few spots I really loved, but I think where it would be a bit more, how would you say, not accessible to people that you don't want there, in the way of, because like this is something I've learned as well, you can't take phones on there because of the sheer fact an addict gets a moment and says, I'll ring up a dealer, and the
yes.
dealer where I
Yes.
am. So
Yes. Yes.
the farm I'm on right now, I have proposed it to the farmer here, and he's warming up to the idea of actually bringing addicts on here for like twice a week where I can work with them. So that gives me a bit of training in that sense to be able to put my perspective of what I would like to do into emotion. So
Yes.
fingers, I'm going to be here for the next 6 months. So fingers crossed he agrees. And that way I can start to handpick a certain amount of addicts through the centers down here and say, look, I would like this person, this person, this person. I would take 4 at a time just to kind of get an idea how to go about it. I've got to start off slow to work my way into it. And I understand and respect the fact that I don't know everything, and I would never presume to know everything.
Mm,
So
mm.
for me to get experience means that I have to again play the situation to see how it works.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. So, you are like, I love what you're doing. I love everything that we've talked about. And I guess sort of start finishing up, like if you were to have a message about creating change to anybody that's watching and listening, what would that be about how to create change in your life?
Trust yourself. Trust yourself like you've never trusted yourself before. You wake up with that thought in your head, blow caution to the wind and go and do it.
I love that.
If you feel doubt within yourself, don't allow others to doubt it even further. Don't doubt it. Go and do it. As long as you're not causing anyone harm. But if you feel in your heart that it's the best thing you could ever do for yourself, do not doubt it and go and try it.
Absolutely love that. That's absolute gold. Thank you so much, Warren. Like, it just means so much that you're here today. And I love connecting with you across the world and sharing your world and your work. Like, it's just so incredibly important. And, like I said before, absolute hats off to you. It's just so, the more people can understand and that perspective of you actually living these experiences just adds so much validity to your work. And I hope everyone can start listening and just being more curious and really taking the time to understand what's going on without the how I look in my role or what I'm, trying to make money and that sort of thing, being driven by the core purposes of helping humans. And because that creates meaning in our life as well. So thank you so much. Is there anything else that you wanted to share, or how can people, do you want to share any sites or how people can follow you? Or
You can always look me up on the site, which is www.warrenrichardson.com. You can send me messages via that if you want to talk with me. But usually my website, if you go to contacts, it usually has everything about where I am and what I'm doing. So that way you can get my Instagram and my Facebook. So, but just live life to the fullest.
yeah,
You only
absolutely. Love it.
get one chance.
That's right. All right. Well, thank you so much. And I hope everyone out there listening, there's no way you could not be impacted by that conversation. And I love, how much you shared and the stories, because, we really connect with stories, and it's such an important piece, isn't it, for us to understand some of the plights and some of the awful things that people are just experiencing and having to deal with every day. It's easy to put our head in the sand and ignore it, but this is going on, and I just love what you're doing. I can't even put words around it. It's just so magnificent. So yeah, thank you.
Well, I like what you're doing too.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm going to change the world one piece at a time.
We'll change it together.
Yes, we will. Thanks, Warren.
Welcome.
All right.